The controversial saga of the Epic Games Store continues, ladies and gentlemen, as it becomes more and more clear just how Spartan the storefront's feature set is. The next major Epic exclusive release will, of course, be none other than the highly anticipated Borderlands 3, which comes out just a month from now on September 13th, 2019. It's a well-known fact that this is a franchise that started out on Steam and fostered an incredible community on that platform, which is why so many fans were dismayed to learn that Gearbox and 2K would be making the shift to what's still an inferior launcher. Maybe fans would be more sympathetic if Gearbox was somehow struggling financially, if there was little certainty when it comes to Borderlands' commercial prospects and potential for success, if we were talking about an indie game from an indie development studio with not much in the way of financial backing, or if Epic were somehow significantly contributing to the game's funding and development, but obviously none of these things are true. Borderlands 3 and Gearbox are backed by 2K, a subsidiary of Take-Two, which is a multi-billion-dollar corporation that rakes money in like few other companies do, and Borderlands 3 is anticipated enough that it will guaranteed sell millions upon millions of copies and easily make its money back, so there's no good reason for this Epic exclusivity deal to be signed beyond making even more money and beyond fostering Epic's aggressive, domineering business tactics that one could hardly call healthy competition. In return, Steam users and millions of Borderlands fans will no longer be able to keep all of their Borderlands games under one platform unless they wait 6 months. Those who buy Borderlands 3 on Epic won't be able to enjoy replayability through achievements. They won't be able to feel the security of having their save files in the cloud as far as we currently know. People in certain regions won't be able to buy Borderlands 3 or will have to pay more for the game due to the lack of regional pricing in certain specific countries. The lack of community features like user reviews and forums means that people can't readily share their thoughts and opinions about the title. And broadly speaking, Epic Games Store still lacks basic things like a shopping cart, a wish list, and even something as simple as the ability to take in-game screenshots. Not to mention the lack of mod support further limits a game's ability to extend its lifespan, and the list just goes on and on. But as if all that wasn't enough, Borderlands 3 fans have learned of another missing feature that's going to further inconvenience a large user base. The following information comes from Twitter, where Tim Sweeney provided some rather unfortunate news in regards to day one buyers of the title. Another Twitter user, going by the name Joe Severo, asked Tim this: "I hate to bother you with a question you probably don't know the answer to, but will we be able to preload Borderlands 3 and will it release at midnight the night of release? Was going to take off work the next day if that's the case." In response, Tim Sweeney said, quote, "I'm sorry, we won't have support for preloading in the Borderlands release timeframe." So, any gamer will know that in this day and age, in 2019, preloading is just about one of the most basic features any video game platform should have. You can preload games on Xbox, you can preload games on PlayStation, you can preload games on Switch, and you can most certainly preload games on Steam. Now, for those who may have very fast internet speed, this may not be as big of an issue, but most people around the world don't have that kind of internet speed that will allow them to download a sizable high-budget game like Borderlands 3 in mere minutes or hours. There are plenty of people out there whose internet speeds are middling enough that it might take them a whole day or two for a download worth dozens of gigabytes to finally finish, which is why preloading is such an important convenience for these people. All the game files can be downloaded a week beforehand, and come launch day, all people have to do is download one more minuscule file that will activate the game and allow players to launch it, and voila, they're playing on the same day and the same hour the game launched in. But with Borderlands 3, because players are forced to use Epic Games Store on PC in order to play the title on launch day, for a lot of people, such a convenience will no longer be available. Some people will have to wait hours, a day, or 2 days before they can actually access the game, all because it's mandatory to use the Epic Games Store, which lacks this feature universally. See, that's the major crux of the Epic Games Store. If the launcher matched or surpassed Steam in terms of features. If they offered consumers enough in return for being forced to use their platform, this whole situation wouldn't be as big of an issue. But instead, Epic rushed their launcher to release and are only focusing on throwing money around to secure exclusives, while their storefront remains as inconvenient to use and as featureless as ever. Unsurprisingly, once word about Tim Sweeney's tweet began to spread, a few people immediately responded with disses expressing further discontent of Epic Games Store's current state. And making matters worse is that, as this Twitter user correctly pointed out, according to Epic's roadmap for their storefront, preloading is listed as a feature that shipped. Indeed, I went to the website and checked myself, and right down here under the Recently Shipped Features tab is a listing for preloading, which is described as follows: released preload functionality to third-party games on the store. And yet, despite the roadmap saying preloading should be readily available across all third-party titles, Tim Sweeney just confirmed that Borderlands 3 will not support such a feature. When the roadmap was pointed out to Tim, he responded with, quote, "It's complicated. We have released support for file preloading, which is sufficient for some games, but we aren't certain it's up to the demands of a blockbuster like Borderlands." Hard to say what exactly Tim means by "it's complicated" and why a game being a blockbuster would in any way, shape, or form impact the ability to implement preload support. Tim didn't do a particularly good job here of explaining the situation with such a vague explanation that did nothing to assuage disgruntled parties. In the end, what we're looking at here is a clear-cut case of a roadmap that's misleading for users. The fact that preloading is listed as a shipped feature implies that the feature is universally available, but the fact remains that preloading is actually not available for all titles. And preloading isn't the only feature that's misleadingly advertised as shipped either. Cloud saves has also been listed as a feature that's been shipped, but in reality the feature isn't supported across all Epic Games Store releases. In fact, according to a report from July 26, 2019, Cloud saves has only rolled out for 2 games, Moonlighter and This War of Mine. Now, it's possible that since then a few more games have gained Cloud save support, but it's still only a handful of titles. And in Tim Sweeney's own words, quote, "Cloud saves are enabled for a couple of new games right now. We have a bit more work to do before rolling it out more widely." Okay, so at best we're looking at a beta test for cloud saves, but the roadmap makes it seem as though the feature is complete, fully shipped, and universally available, which is not the case. If cloud saves need more time for universal implementation, fine, but don't list it as a shipped feature because it's not really shipped. Now, the cloud saves listings description did eventually get updated to state, quote, "We have shipped the V1 implementation of cloud saves. We'll let you know when it's available across titles that support this feature." But still, cloud saves is listed as a shipped feature when it's still being tested, which makes this roadmap rather confusing and misleading. And while we're at it, let's talk about the roadmap as a whole in general for a second. Many of you wouldn't know this given Epic hasn't provided any updates on the roadmap, but a bunch of its features have been delayed. As noted by website PC Invasion, quote, "Yesterday, July 31st, 2019, the managers of the Epic Games Store roadmap on Trello quietly updated the target release window for 5 of those features: the release schedule for Humble Bundle integration, player playtime tracking, improved patch sizes, store video hosting, and store page redesign, all changed from July to August. Now, I actually have a screenshot of the roadmap since as far back as March 2019, and the delays are actually even worse than what PC Invasion is reporting. Features like store video hosting, store page redesign, and improved patch sizes were actually targeted for even earlier than July. Looking at the roadmap from back in March, you can see that these 3 features were originally targeted for April and May releases, and now their target releases are listed as August. So that's a 3 to 4 month delay. Also worth pointing out are features like user reviews, wishlists, newsfeed and follow improvements, price adjustment bundles, additional payment methods, additional currencies, player playtime tracking, mod support for games, Epic Games Overlay, and library improvements. Of these 4 to 6 months features from back in March, only 2 of them, player playtime tracking and library improvements, have been moved forward to a 1 to 3 months time frame, with player playtime tracking already being delayed from July to August. August, as previously mentioned, while the rest of these features are still listed in the 4 to 6 months timeframe. Despite 5 months having gone by since March, the timeframe for those features have not budged one bit. Back in March, a 4 to 6 months timeframe would suggest that these features would release within the window of between July and September. We are in August now, and a 4 to 6 months timeframe now suggests these features will be released between December 2019 and February 2020, which is one hell of a delay. This is important information, but Epic isn't really announcing any of this stuff. They aren't providing any updates. They're just sort of delaying things and moving around features and release estimates without rhyme or reason. And the consistent inconsistency of this roadmap, topped with misleading listings like preloading and cloud saves being labeled as shipped features, makes the Epic Game Store roadmap pretty damn useless. A roadmap is supposed to help people discern when features can be expected and help them keep track of progress, but either of those things are impossible to do with Epic's lack of transparency and lack of consistency, which makes Epic exclusivity all the more frustrating, and which is why you got people responding to Tim Sweeney with posts like this, comparing Borderlands 2 on Steam and Borderlands 3 on Epic Game Store. As noted here, Borderlands 2 from 2012 offered preload, whereas Borderlands 3 releasing in 2019 does not. Borderlands 2 from 2012 offered cloud saves, whereas Borderlands 3 releasing in 2019 is still uncertain on that front. Borderlands 2 from 2012 had achievements and was playable on Linux, whereas Borderlands 3 releasing in 2019 offers none of these things 7 years later. And as I keep repeating, I don't want to hear that Steam had 15 years to get to where it is now, because all that progress and knowledge over the years are things that should be applied as standard today. Just because 20 years ago phone companies made these Spartan flip phones doesn't mean that a company should enter the market by releasing Spartan flip phones before working their way up to smartphones. Instead, they should use the knowledge and progress over those 20 years and release a smartphone that's competitive in the features and innovations that it offers to stand out from the pack. Also, while we're on the topic of preloading, did I mention that Steam could preload games since as far back as Half-Life 2's release back in 2004? Preloading is a feature we have had for 15 years now, and yet fast forward to 2019, and Epic somehow struggling with something so standard, something so old, a feature that's been with us for so long. The cherry on top to this whole situation are some of the thoughts Randy Pitchford previously shared in support of the Epic Game Store. Back in April 2019, Randy said this: Epic has published a near-term roadmap. This roadmap includes a look into things they are committing to. If I were a betting man, I would expect that there are more things that happen than what they are committing to. Yeah, tell that to all the delays and the incomplete feature releases that render this roadmap insignificant and untrustworthy. Now, throughout this Twitter thread, Randy did acknowledge that if Epic doesn't launch with enough features by the time Borderlands 3 comes out, Epic will suffer again, and he acknowledged that there is a risk that not enough features will be done by the time Borderlands 3 launches, but he also said that it's ultimately worth the risk because he believes Borderlands 3 and future games will ultimately be best served in Epic Game Store. Yeah, well, that would be nice, and as much as I'd love to believe him, as things currently stand, there has yet to be a single benefit that consumers are getting from Borderlands 3 going Epic exclusive. Randy touted in one of his tweets how customers, developers, and publishers alike will benefit from Epic's endeavors, but as things currently stand, while there's no denying developers and publishers definitely benefit from all this, customers aren't seeing or feeling any such benefits. The opposite is true. There are a number of tangible drawbacks to Borderlands 3 launching on Epic Store that didn't exist when Borderlands 2 launched on Steam way back when. From there, Randy Pitchford spent some time vouching for Epic's track record as a company with good intentions before concluding with this. And some of you guys are going to look at the Epic Game Store around when Borderlands 3 launches and think about how far it's come, and some of you will go ahead and join in with us at launch. Well, look at how that panned out. We are 1 month out from Borderlands 3's launch, and we have just learned the game won't support preloading, a basic standard feature. A rude awakening for those who are hoping to dive into the game the minute, the hour, the day the game launches. And looking at the confused and constantly shifting roadmap, we can see that a bunch of Epic Store features have been delayed by months without notice, and who knows how much further they'll be pushed back. Randy Pitchford expressed all this confidence that Epic Games Store will be up to par, that he believes the store will be in a good place by the time Borderlands 3 launches, but all we have seen is that progress on launcher features has been slow, confusing, and wildly inconsistent, while progress on securing exclusivity deals have been unyielding and steadfast. From a consumer perspective, there is simply nothing to show for all the confidence and faith Randy put into the Epic Games Store. Will the Epic Store eventually get to a point where it'll be as feature complete as Steam? Probably, yes, eventually. I'm sure, for example, that preloading will eventually become more universal, but I have to wonder how much goodwill they'll have lost along the way by the time the store becomes more feature complete with all of these unsavory exclusivity deals, and how much of an effect all of this will ultimately have on the storefront's future prospects. Anyway, that's all I have to say on the matter. I'd love to hear what your take is on Borderlands 3's lack of preloading and the current state of the Epic Games Store's roadmap in the comments below. With that, I would like to end this news update and discussion video. Thank you for tuning in. To be further updated on all things gaming news, reviews, and discussions, stay tuned right here on Yong Yeah. I'll see you guys next time. Yong out.